and Adjustments and Zoning Board of Appeals. Would you all please rise for the invocation led by Mr. Russ Wynn, and please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance by Richard Donnelly.
Let us pray. Father, we ask your blessings to be on our gathering this morning. We thank you, Lord, for the opportunity to serve this beautiful country and this beautiful city of Bonita Springs. We ask you for wisdom and guidance in your name. Amen.
Amen. Please face the flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would you please be so kind to turn off your cell phones and devices? Okay. And we have a roll call, please, Charlie.
Roger Brunswick,
Present.
Barbara Barnes Buchanan, Russ Wynn,
Here.
Chairman Serby,
Here.
Richard Donnelly,
Here.
Larry Kurlander,
Here.
James Worcester.
Here.
We have a request from the applicant for Hidden Lakes that their case be postponed until July 18th meeting. We have-
That's correct. You presented it well. If somebody can do a motion, that would be great.
Right. May we have a motion?
I'll make a
Yes,
motion.
Larry.
I have a question. This is a reasonably large project. Doing it in the dead of summer when even people who live here full-time are traveling, I think is less than transparent. Wouldn't it be better if we put it over until more people are here so that they have an opportunity to be heard?
Well, we're talking about Hidden Lakes, and the Spanish Wells community, which is the adjacent property owner, is familiar with the case, and they have been actively coordinating with staff and the applicant. One of the positions, or one of the statements that has been made before is the city runs year-round. So to try to do everything during the seasonal period does create or can impose a hardship, and people are entitled to due process.
Seems to me that we can accommodate due process, that we're not denying due process, especially where the applicant is requesting the adjournment.
If I may, Jacqueline Genson, for the record, this same issue came up with our Raptor Bay case, which is scheduled for August. And we had addressed this concern with Special Outside Counsel David Theriak. And as Ms. Vance stated, he was concerned that there would be a due process violation and that we were unable to wait until season for the population to return. But we can definitely have Special Counsel go ahead and opine on that. And actually, we have to call Terrell Airline.
Excuse me, he was concerned that there's a due process violation if we adjourn it?
If you it's one thing to continue a case in accordance with our land development code.
No.
It's another to continue a case for a time and date certain, longer than what the applicant has requested, because people may or may not show during that time period. Now, in all actuality, this case may be continued further. The other thing is when you do a continuance, there are possibilities that there's going to be other issues that are going to be occurring during the time while you're waiting, and then those people leave. So it's a year-round city. It's very difficult on both city staff, the applicant, but it's also what is fair. Now, if we change our procedures that we only do zoning hearings from August to May, unless, I mean, that could be something, or not August to May, but I don't know, November to April. We could potentially write an ordinance. Whether that ordinance could be upheld or not, I don't know. I tend to think that would be very difficult to uphold.
Anybody else? Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Roger Brunswick, seconded.
Second.
Thank you, so carried. Madam Attorney, would you call the first case, please?
I think you need to, you did the motion, but, okay. So everybody voted for it. Okay. The first case is Bonita Breeze, Commercial Plan Development, rezoning PD 31234 BOS. This is a request to rezone 1.79 acres from C1 Commercial to Commercial Plan Development located at 4276 Bonita Beach Road, as well as 27696 Okina Street. At this time, I will swear in witnesses that will be testifying. Mr. Stewart, you're going to be presenting the case. Do you want to come sit up front with maybe the owner or whoever else? Okay, Jolene. I'm going to have everybody raise their hand. If you're going to speak on this case, I will need people sworn in, and I am very embarrassed because I forgot the resumes that I'm not sure I have them right here. But let me swear in staff first, and then I'll get you. Jackie Genson, Jay Sweet, Stuart Smith, Sam Vincent, Michael Kirby. Mike Keegan, are you going to speak up tonight? No, okay. And John Dolmer. Please raise your right hands. Do you affirm or swear, do you affirm that the testimony you provide today is true, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Now, Ms. Genson, you've previously been tendered as an expert in land use and planning. Mr. Sweet, you've been previously tendered as an expert in land use and planning, as well as surveying. Mr. Smith, you've been previously tendered as an expert in civil engineering. Mr. Vincent, you've been previously tendered as an expert in architecture. Mr. Kirby, you've been previously tendered as an expert in environmental science. And Mr. Dolmer, you've been previously tendered as an expert in land use and planning. At this time, I'll ask the applicants please to swear in. Please raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Thank you. Now, Mr. Stewart, you've been previously tendered as an expert in land use and planning. Mr. Quattrin, you've been previously tendered as an expert in civil engineering. And if the board wants any of them to have additional credentials, and I keep saying Jolene Dara. Jolene Dara, please come up here. This is your first time before us, correct? Yes. I'm going to ask you some questions. Please put the microphone close to your mouth. And we do have a court reporter, so it's important that we get the words out correctly. Okay. Please state your full name for the record.
Jolene Dara
And where are you employed?
at Southview Studios, and that's my own company.
And what do you do at your own company?
I design buildings. I'm an architect.
Okay, and as an architect, do you have any special education?
Yes, I have a bachelor degree in architecture and also a master's degree in architecture from the University of Tennessee.
Okay, and do you have licenses held in the state of Florida?
Yes, in Florida and in Tennessee.
Okay, and that's as an architect?
Mm-hmm.
And also, do you, I could ask if you have any literature or anything, but that's not necessary, but if you do.
Well, I have a thesis document that was published with, in conjunction with my Master's of Architecture, and I've been involved in other publications through the University of Tennessee.
And any professional activities also?
Yes, I'm involved in the American Institute of Architects, and also I continue to work with the University of Tennessee in projects in Haiti and in Appalachia, serving areas of extreme poverty.
Now, have you testified before?
Not here, no.
Okay, but you have testified in other jurisdictions?
Yes, in the city of Naples.
And was that case somewhat similar, a zoning case?
It was for architectural review
Okay,
standards, design standards.
okay. And was that testimony before a zoning case, or was that for ordinance promulgation?
I believe it was a zoning case. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I have no further questions. I believe she can be tendered as an expert in architecture.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Stewart, you can present your case. Please proceed. Okay. Okay, and also before we start, I want to make sure everyone is aware, we do have outside counsel, Terrell Arline, on the telephone right now. Mr. Arline, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Good morning.
Good morning. We'll be starting the case right now. And Mr. Stewart?
This is just his slides. That's all this is.
Put on my glasses now that you turned off the lights, I can't see. Thank you. Okay, sorry. Hi, good morning. Greg Stewart for the record. I'm working with Al Catrone, Catrone and Associates in Fort Myers. We're very pleased to present this, the Bonita Breeze CPD. It's a luxury condominium self-storage facility. As Jolene's been introduced, Jolene's been working hard as the project architect. Al's here to address any civil engineering questions that you may have as the presentation rises. Before I start, I really would like to thank staff, Jackie Jensen and Sam Vincent, John Dolmer, Mike Kirby. Appreciate your input. Stuart, late to the show, but we appreciate all your input too. If I've missed anybody, my apologies. What the project is a rezoning. It's a C1 parcel. We're rezoning to commercial plan development. It's on a 1.7 acre gross property that adjoins Bonita Beach Road. What the project is not is a mini warehouse type facility. Typical mini warehouse facilities are, you know, they have like 80,000 square feet. The units are varied, you know, from, let's say, 10 by 10 to 10 by 20. It's a very intense use. Many warehouses are more associated with light industrial, and they're rental. In this particular case, the project is not a mini warehouse. It's a luxury condominium. The units typically, though they vary in size for discussion purposes, they're 20 by 45, and there are 25 of them. We agree with staff with their recommended approval and conditions. In terms of meeting the project entitlements, certainly we do we agree with their recommended findings of approval. They provided a really good synopsis of the history of the site, the project's entitlements, so that's in your staff report, page 2 and 3. I don't need to go over that. Also, staff has provided a very good overview of how this works with the Bonita Beach Road visioning plan. Excuse me, that's on page 4. On the staff report, page 6, you'll see the schedule of uses and actual discussion of those scheduled uses are on page 16. It's very limited in terms of the uses. Self-storage, mini warehouse, administrative office, as relating to the application and management and sales of the project. Then, of course, we have, you know, the accessory uses, the entrance gate, parking, signs, that type of thing. So it's a very restricted project. We have 5 deviations. Staff has recommended approval of all 5 deviations. Needless to say, we agree with that. And then if you look at, in the staff report, page 22 and 23, we do meet the zoning entitlements. If you look at how this fits into the Bonita Springs Comprehensive Plan and its Land Development Code, we comply with the future commercial policies and goals, transportation policies and goals, resource protection. We also comply with pending Bonita Beach Road visioning excuse me, plans and their policies and goals. So if you look at page 13 to 16, you'll see how that fits in. We certainly, as a matter of criteria to be found consistent and to become entitled, we exceed most performance standards. The locational standards really aren't appropriate here. But if you look at, as 2 examples, our open space, the requirement's 20%. We're providing 40%. Building coverage, typically it's this type of project in code allows up to 40% building coverage. We're at 28%. So we, as those 2 examples, and as my presentation progresses, we'll show you how the project exceeds or at least meets various goals, policies, standards, and the like. we're consistent with the densities and intensities along Bonita Beach Road. For example, just immediately to the west, if you look at the Bonita Oak Square, it's a retail plaza at around 21,880 square feet. You know, we're at 22,000 square feet. So we fit in to that context. It's a single-story facility. Adjoining the properties are single-story, single-family and duplex homes, and then multi-story condominiums, so we fit in there. We're a low traffic generator. If you look at the criteria in terms of having the necessary infrastructure and services to serve the project. For traffic, again, we're low impact. Our TIS shows the maximum peak hour at 6 p.m. peak hour trips. Personally, after looking at this project, it's probably going to be like 1 or 2, but again, if you look at 6 trips per hour, that just gives you an idea how low an impact this thing really presents. And then also total new trips are at 55 vehicles per day. BSU is providing central water and central sanitary sewer, so we meet the infrastructure and service provisions. When you look at the criteria pertaining to adversely affecting natural resources, almost half the property is 17211 urban open lands. The property has been formerly, a long time ago, been cleared and altered and filled. Now you have scattered oaks, pines, and a few palms. We are making every good effort to preserve a number of existing palm trees, oaks, and pines, so we meet that criteria. The balance of the property is the old car wash that has been demolished, so what you have there is basically a scraped property in the front, so we meet that criteria. If you look at the conditions relating to potential impacts, and that's in staff report 16 through 20, with the exception of conditions 6B and 6C, of which we're still working on in terms of fine-tuning the language. We agree with the conditions. They reasonably relate to the project, its impact, and the relationship of the project to fitting into, you know, where Bonita Springs wants to go. You know, the conditions are reasonably related, and we agree with them. And again, as at the end of my presentation, I'll get into the discussion of 6C. So again, it's a C1 to CPD for 22,000 square feet. The site has approximately 0.44 acres of easements, so really the net site is 1.35 acres. It's, generally speaking, it's at the intersection of Okina and Bonita Beach Road. It's immediately east of that, adjoining the Taco Mix convenience store and Taco Mix restaurant, which, by the way, has the best burritos and tacos in Bonita Springs. There's a little plug there. The illustration shows it's generally 2/3 of the way west of the intersection 41 and Bonita Springs. Bonita Beach Road. It's in the beach zone segment identified in the Bonita Beach Road visioning plan, so that's what we're dealing with. And then again, the site conditions, you have upland xeric, deep sugar sand type soils, you have scattered oaks and pines and palms.
Good morning again. So I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about the context of the neighborhood where our site is. There is, basically the neighborhood has many eclectic styles of buildings, and so there are a few examples of old Florida type architecture immediately adjacent to the site. Is there a waiter? Right here?
Oh, for the light?
Yeah. Yeah, okay. So with the Bonita Beach Walk directly adjacent to the site, and this represents our site right here. And as you can see, just some low nondescript buildings that are immediately adjacent across the street and down the street. So we looked to the neighborhood for cues on architectural style. Some of the more positive features that we found were the use of horizontal siding in that kind of historical application of clapboard siding, the deep overhangs, the framed windows, and metal roofs in the area. And then, how do I change? I'm sorry, I should have asked you. Okay. And so you can see a little bit more of that in the neighborhood directly to the west. This is the Bonita Beach Walk. We have the Flamingo Hotel here. And then we are surrounded by residential in the rear of the site, 2 duplexes directly to the north of the site. This is on Okina with residential in the back. This is actually from within the site looking to the west. And then these are the 2 buildings that are pretty much on the property, sharing a property line with us, with the taco restaurant and store there. Let's see. And then we can get right into the key attributes. So ultimately, the significance of this project is not just of a building as an object, but it's more of its role as a gateway from the city of Bonita Springs out to the waterfront. And so this being one of the first new developments under the new vision plan, we know that it will be a precedent for future development. Therefore, we've taken extra care and consideration to integrate the building into the neighborhood with both landscaping and the building massing character and style. The architectural style being Old Florida, in that it complements the neighborhood in its horizontal siding, color, accentuated parapets. We have a metal roof, peaked metal roof feature, and creating the tower feature there on the corner brings about the feeling of the gateway and also provides a sense of place for along the road, along the Bonita Beach Road, and also into the project because that's where you turn in. So overall, I think that the key attributes are creating a project that is good for the city and also meets the needs and desires of our clients.
Yes, as I stated in the introduction, we're proposing 25 high-end condominium units. When you look at the Bonita Springs community with the tens of thousands of homeowners, residents, and seasonal residents of the city that live in condominiums, what this project does is provide an opportunity, if you will, as someone can purchase an accessory off-site garage, because that's really what we're talking about. It's an accessory off-site garage. So whether they're antique car collectors or high-end sports car collectors or RV owners that want to have a place to store their RV or boats, it provides that type of storage. But equally important, I know the term's been thrown out as these are man caves, but really they can be used, by men and women alike. They provide a perfect opportunity if one's into the arts for a studio, for a place to paint and to sculpt, or if one's into woodworking and crafts and that type of thing. So it provides a really needed accessory facility for the community. Another key attribute is when you look at what we're trying to do, and as the presentation goes forward, we are implementing the Bonita Beach Road visioning plan. We're providing in our 30-foot Bonita Beach Road buffer a multi-use path, street furnishings. We're improving the bus stop, doing some keen landscaping, that type of thing. What we're also doing is, as the use schedule documents, we're eliminating a number of very potentially high nuisance type uses, fast food restaurants, gas convenience store, auto repair, mobile home dealerships, vehicle and equipment sales, those types of uses that are vehicular in nature. The orientation is for those types of uses to tie into, and so by eliminating them, that helps to sponsor and elevate the Bonita Beach Road into a more complete street, if you will. The project preserves 12 native pines, oaks, and palms, including a 22-inch heritage pine. 4 of the larger preserved pines are along Okina, which provides for a really neat augmentation to the buffer that we are planning on. It also increases your tax base to an estimated $6,292 annually, up from $1,700 plus. So that's a nice little perk. And the project advances interconnection and interconnectivity. So when you look at interconnectivity, the first thing you'll notice, the project consists of 4 buildings. The largest building is approximately 180 feet. That's that one. The smallest, the least linear building is 80 feet along Bonita Beach Road. We're providing shared access by modifying this existing shared access easement. For discussion purposes, let's say it's a 40 by 40 easement, and we're pulling that all the way down approximately 110, 115 feet, and then that will be used to provide interconnectivity to whatever happens to the east. Condition 6 deals with that, and we'll discuss that in a second. Another aspect of interconnectivity is to expand the easement across the BSU easement to also tie into the property to the east. That ultimately may provide very, very good access given Okina and the distance between the signalized intersection and Bandit provides enough stacking. Okina is a local street, so there's a lot of capacity, so forth and so on. Another means of interconnectivity is the multi-use bike path. So again, that ultimately is, according to your plan, will tie into the beach area and then go back to Publix along the 41 intersection. In terms of tree preservation, this graphic shows illustrates the large heritage tree that we're preserving. It's a 22-inch pine, along with the 4 other pines that we're preserving. Oaks in the back. Again, the plan calls for 12 native trees to be preserved. The project has gone in front of the city's tree preservation council. They like what we're doing. They gave us the sign off, so we're in front of that. And then if you look at the graphics, it shows the existing trees that unfortunately are going to be in the way of the project. So the graphic depicts what we're doing and why we're doing it. With regard to the vision plan, the graphics in front of you provide an illustrative detail, both plan graphic and cross section. And if you look at the staff report, there's good narrative on page 15 and how this ties into the city's bikeway policy 174. We are consistent with that policy. In general terms, we're putting in a multi-use bike path, 8 feet wide. Between Bonita Beach Road and the path, we'll have a single to triple landscape hedge with canopy trees. And then on the north side of the path, there will be additional landscaping. We're calling for a continuous hedge along the building. We're almost doubling the landscape materials. We're putting in palm clusters. We call for a specific number of palms and palm clusters in addition to the canopy trees. So we're almost doubling the minimum required. So again, that ties back into why we're entitled for the rezoning. We're exceeding various performance standards. The cross section shows how this will work. It shows we have requested a deviation to do a smaller 1 to 2 foot berm, which staff is approving. We envision this as highly landscaped, highly functional. It ties into the architecture in regards to creating a real neat gateway as you're driving west to the beach. The breakdowns of the shrubbery, 80 to 90 shrubs, 8 to 9 canopy trees, 8 clustered palm trees, that type of thing. We're also modifying the sign by right. We have a much larger sign, but we're putting in a smaller 5 by 10 monument sign. So these are the types of things that we're doing on the environmental design and landscape design to fit into the city's vision of what they want to see going on Bonita Beach Road. The buffering plan's complex, and the reason why it's complex is that there are different standards for different attributes on the site. Starting along Bonita Beach Road, we're doing a 30-foot type F, and these are minimum standards, 6 trees per 100 linear feet with a double hedge on a low berm, a 1 to 2 foot berm. That contrasts with along the eastern boundary, We've offset the building out to keep it outside of the BSU easement, and then we're doing like a 10-foot landscaping strip to accommodate the required type A plantings, 4 trees per 100 linear foot, plus the new required 490 plantings. We estimate that there will be approximately 8 trees and 3 shrub hedges, and each shrub hedge will be around 20 feet in length on that. And again, we're outside of the easement, so there won't be any type of conflicts or you know, the removal of trees because of work in the easement. Along the north building, we have a 25-foot type F, 5 trees per 100 linear feet, double hedge. Also, based upon the meeting 490, we estimate there's going to be 2 additional trees needed, so we're probably going to plant them around the service area. When you go to the west along this building, because we're constrained by Vanda, we requested a deviation, which staff approves, to go with a 15-foot buffer with, again, 5 trees per 100 linear feet and a double hedge. Now, along Okina, we're back to putting a low berm, 1 to 2 foot berm. It's a 15 to 20 foot type F. You see bump outs right here and here to preserve the large existing trees. And we're doing 6 trees per 100 linear feet. And then finally, behind, this is the Taco Mix restaurant. So behind Taco Mix, a classic type A, commercial to commercial, 5 foot wide buffer, 4 trees per 100 linear feet. So it's differentiated based on the uses and the functionality. This illustration, you know, gives you an idea of how this works in terms of cross section. Note on the Okina Street, we're putting a screening wall in between 2 buildings to block views looking into the parking lot. That was a staff suggestion, good suggestion. It also shows some of the conserved pine trees, shows the low berm. On Vanda, it shows our regulatory plantings, but also if the budget allows, because we do own Vanda, I mean, you know, it's ours, we may go with some type of gateway palms or other types of plantings to help create a better entrance, and then also, you know, to mask the 2 duplexes. So it shows both the regulatory and the optional plantings. In terms of the deviations, again, there are 5 deviations. We agree with staff. We worked hard with staff, and we appreciate them giving a thumbs up on all 5 deviations. Just real quick, on deviation 1, it's a stacking. So instead of 100 foot, it's at 46 feet, but the concept is you have the entire Vanda, which really is used by 1 driveway. It's a duplex, so there's more than adequate capacity for stacking. So that's approved. On deviation 2 is because of the 40-foot Vanda easement, we can only do a 15-foot. So that's where that deviation comes into play. We're still meeting the code standard for plantings, but the width is shorter. That said, one of the reasons why the deviation is granted is that you still have a 40-foot separation, which is plenty given the fact that, again, we're dealing with 2 duplexes. Deviation 3 consists of two parts, 3A and 3B. 3A is an existing driveway connections separation standard on Bonita Beach Road here. And again, that's an existing connection, that's an existing connections, and the deviation, you have to request that, and we did, and again, we appreciate staff recommending approval. Deviation B is the same thing in terms of Vanda and Bonita Beach Walk's driveway. There are 2 existing driveways, so we had to request that deviation, which is approved. Deviation 4 is a street stub internal to the project that ties into where the Taco Mix restaurant is. We've requested deviation. Staff has agreed to that, subject to condition 6B, which we'll discuss shortly. But we're locked in step on deviation 4, and then deviation 5 pertains to the new code requirement to have a 4-foot berm on self-storage facilities that are adjoin public right-of-ways. A 4-foot berm would essentially, because of your side slopes, would eliminate the bike path. I mean, it's too constraining, plus it interferes with the vision that I understand it to be, which is more of an urban functional streetscape. So having a big old berm doesn't fit in, so we requested a 1 to 2 foot berm, which is approved. And then on Okina, the rationale is that in trying to preserve 4 large palm trees by building, again, a 4-foot berm with the side slopes, you'll nuke the pine trees. So instead of 4 foot, 1 to 2 foot, so that's where deviation 5 comes in. In terms of the comprehensive plan, if you look in the staff report, page 13 and 14, they do a good discussion. Also, in attachment C, the applicant's backup materials, we have provided a multi-page Bonita Springs Comp Plan Consistency Report that identifies just a bunch of goals and policies and objectives that we comply with. I won't go into that, but just to point out some of the more important ones in terms of the project itself. It's located in the general commercial land use. The existing zoning is being replaced by a very select and specific CPD that eliminates a large number of incompatible uses, so we're consistent with that. When you look at objective 1.3, the city's visual appearance, as the presentation goes forward and Jolene gets up, you'll see between the architecture and the streetscaping and the landscaping, we're meeting 1.3, 1.31, and 1.32 in terms of urban design elements to create a special character and livability. Objective 4, compatible land uses. We are compatible. If you look at, again, going back to the trip generation, there's no real heavy through traffic onto Okina. The building mass is single story. In fact, though our development standards call for a 28-foot maximum, the actual building's at 24, so physically it's compatible. And then the uses are compatible. You'll see in the staff report, they make comment about these types of facilities are inherently compatible because, no one's, it's self-storage. It's a passive type use. You don't have a lot of people coming and going. So it's compatible with that, and then the buffering really helps ensure that. And then if you look at 490, which I referred to earlier, we have designed the project to meet the new code standards that were enacted. I think it was Ordinance 17-02. So we comply with that. And in terms of transportation policy, again, 131, complete street design principles. The multifunctional paths, the street furnishings, bus stop improvements. That also ties into 211, 212, and 213, the amenities. In terms of policy 226, the interconnectivity, I described that. So we meet that policy. And then in conservation policy 724, I plug that in. It's not transportation policy, but I plug that in because what we've tried to do to the maximum extent possible, given the functional demands of the project, is to preserve as much as we can. So we have, and so that's how we fit into the comp plan. But again, please go into attachment C and also staff report. One of the things that we're doing, and this is also condition 3, and also staff report page 17, is that we're proposing a number of restrictive covenants, and these also help to ensure compatibility and smooth operation. The covenants will include the owners will not be able to operate businesses. They can't use it as a residence. They can't store their stuff outside. They can park it, but then ultimately they're pulling it in. They can't repair boats, trailers, RVs. Trash and unused items, is prohibited. They've got to put it in storage or put it in the units. The unit owners can't cause excessive or prolonged noises on the property. So we're going to have a number of restricted covenants. What we envision as we get closer to the city council hearing, hopefully with your recommended approval, we will have an actual final legalese type draft for staff council, and the city council to review. And again, that these have been modified, but they're in condition 3. And Jolene?
All right, so I would like to take you through the architectural features of the buildings in that we have, with the help of staff, come up with an Old Florida architecture to complement this area in the best way possible. So we are meeting and exceeding in most cases 490 in our attempt to meet with the Old Florida style. We have, by nature of the project, we do have small building massing. We have multiple buildings on the site, so that creates a small building massing strategy that fits in well in the neighborhood, both with the residential components and also the commercial components in the area that are also broken up into smaller components. We have the lap siding located along the front facade, and as you'll see when we go around the site, it continues, the same character continues around the site on all street fronts facing private and commercial properties. So we have the horizontal lap siding. We have an articulated parapet along here with decorative moldings and decorative details along that area. We have integrated a Bahama shutter feature that is repetitive and creates a rhythm along all facades. We have banding around our window openings, and we've incorporated brackets, which is common on a lot of Old Florida architecture. Brackets holding the Bahama shutters as well as the peaked roof, metal roof system on our tower feature. By nature of the project, we don't need windows along, it's not a desired effect for a self-storage building, but we have incorporated windows along all street front facades, and these will be made of either opaque glass or some kind of glass tile, which when we get into the architectural standards more, we will work with staff to make sure we meet that guideline. And also we do have more than 30% of glass along the front here, which is required. And this is more of a perspective view. You can see that although this is the side that faces Bonita Beach Road, we've also treated both of the side elevations as front facades as well, since you will be able to see those driving back and forth on Bonita Beach Road. So we've brought the Bahama shutters around the corner, and the parapet goes all the way around the building so that it's a cohesive look and you don't ever see an edge of a parapet. So basically just creating a variety of architectural components that make up that Old Florida style. Also bringing in some lighting for nighttime effect that will highlight the texture of the horizontal siding. This is the frontage along Okina Street, and these are the ends of two of the storage buildings and the screen wall that Greg mentioned that will, and this will also have some trees in front of it that will help screen the parking lot inside. Again, we're bringing around that parapet, the Bahama shutter features, and the rhythm of the window openings and frames around those. This elevation is along Vanda Drive. So this is the rear of one of the storage buildings and the side of another one. And this is the secondary entrance, which you can see here with a gate where cars can enter off of Vanda Drive. We'll be creating hedges along the street front and a row of palm trees. Again, with the Bahama shutters, the detailing on the parapet, cornice, and decorative moldings throughout. And the breakup of the building mass along this elevation and Okina is complementary to the residential neighborhood. This is kind of an aerial view of the project where you can see the shade trees out front along Bonita Beach Road, the mixture of landscaping on the other side of the multi-use path and also up against the building, and as it turns the corner, more trees, and then this is the tree and landscape buffer along the east side of the building facing the empty lot on the east side of the building there. This is the gate, the main entry here. We can see that we've treated that building as a front facade as well. So basically from all 4 sides of the site, we have the architectural features repeating. And from this view, we just hope to show you that this is an upscale design precedent for future development, and that we are meeting and exceeding the vision plan as well as 490 for architectural features. And this view shows kind of an up close of what it might look like on the multi-use path. See the biker and just the scale of the Bahama shutters, the architectural features relating at a human scale as you pass by this building, both on foot, bike, and by car. And so we really feel that we've accomplished an architectural style that from the outside kind of is pleasing to the neighborhood and to the city, while on the inside it's providing a safe and secure place for the users with our ability to use gates, screen walls, and also hide all of the overhead doors that are on the inside. And we've done that effectively. As an architect, though, I am charged to strike a balance between what the city wants and what they desire, and also what my client wants, and the user of the building and what that might look like. So with that, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the evolution of the design of this building. We have, with the help of staff, we've been steered towards an old Florida architecture to fit in with the community and as an alternative to the design and style that we started with. When we first came and started this project, we were looking at modern architecture, which is in your code and is allowed under 490 for this type of building. And we felt that it was an opportunity. We were excited to present an opportunity of modern architecture that also brought in the attributes of the surrounding neighborhood, and having a dialogue with some of the old Florida architecture in the neighborhood and some of the more nondescript buildings in the neighborhood. So we brought forth, in this design, we brought the horizontal siding that is characteristic of old Florida, but we put it in a natural material and in a different application than old Florida. But we wanted to have fun with it and remind people of the boardwalks and the wood structures of the docks and pay homage to the beach in that way. And then in the lower part of the structure, we used the color of sand and made punched openings that could remind you of sea glass and the color of sea glass, paying homage again to the beach. And then the dark metal structure here is a canopy that would extend out from the building all the way around, creating those shadow lines and that you see in the deep overhangs throughout Bonita Springs and other beach areas in the city. So, and this type of architecture also fits our user more because they are storing expensive boats, expensive cars. They live a modern lifestyle. And so this type of architecture reflects their needs and their desires to have a building that they are associated with. And also creating that landmark structure in the community that is different, it's new, it's fun, it's progressive, and it really does become a landmark in the community. So we just bring this up to show you where we started and then where we ended up with the help of staff and with knowledge of maybe something, an alternative option for you with the old Florida. I think that's it. Or is there one more? Oh, yes, and we put these in the presentation just to show you a couple of other modern buildings that are going up in beach towns all over the country. A lot of beach towns are embracing the fact that modern architecture can be fun, can be a landmark in the community, and progressive in the community. So these are examples of using wood, natural materials, glass in a small scale like our project is, and relating to the beach town in that way. All right? Did you want to talk about that?
Yeah, why not?
Dick?
Yeah, and before we leave architecture, staff has condition 4 that recommends that the project be developed in a manner consistent with the old Florida mix. As part of your deliberations, we certainly would like your input about architecture. Again, the client would like to go with modern. We'll go old Florida, but modern does fit. The functionality of the project ties into the modern form better than the old Florida form. So please feel free to, discuss. I mentioned condition 6. We are still working with staff on condition 6. It's really important. 6B ties into, the condition 6B ties into future interconnects with Taco Mix, okay? And then 6C ties in with the future connection to the property to the east. Starting with 6B, it's just important to put on the record that if their driveway is closed, they will, regardless of any type of interconnect, because they have full turning movements to a signalized intersection, plus if Vanda ties in and does an interconnect, there's still an east-west interconnect regardless of what happens on any redevelopment. So I wanted to point that out. I believe that we are really close with staff's new language on 6B. Again, we're still working with staff, but I think they've really nailed it. There may be one tweak or two, but I think we're there on 6B. 6C is important, though, in that, okay, it seems kind of innocent. Okay, you're going to close it to make sure that it's make sure that there's no egress coming in, that it's strictly an exit at the point of time when this thing's developed. But it's really, I can't stress this enough. It's so important for this project to sell these units, to get off the ground, to have our potential owners and users come in off of Bonita Beach Road and turn in. So having that type of turning movement into the project is really important. Staff recognizes that. It's a matter of crafting language that deals with the marketing reality at hand. Ultimately, once these units are sold and the owners are used to, okay, we can pop out like that and we can come in this way and up Vanda, that's down the line and that'll be acceptable. But our concern really, okay, getting this thing off the ground, which is so important, because when you're going into the debt market, by a few $1 million to build this thing, you want to make sure that you meet your absorption, you meet your sales, and we don't want anything that would kind of kick this thing sideways. As I said, we're still working on 6C. The principal issues that we're trying to deal with is to define development. We were looking at defining development in terms of vertical certificate of occupancy. Stewart and others have informed us that, well, if it is a commercial parking lot to the east, then it can't be vertical. So we're trying to come up with a definition, a triggering mechanism, if you will. So that's one of the issues. And then we want to make sure that the language also deals with the Bonita Beach Road access and not Vanda access. It's our understanding, and staff agrees, that 6C solely deals with this, let's call it a frontage road and not Vanda, but we need to tighten that up a little bit. And then also we need to tighten up language that specifies it's not just publicly recorded reciprocal access easement, but it has to be, a fully functioning road connecting to Bonita Beach Road. It has to be utilized. So those are the concepts that we're dialing into. And again, it's a work in progress. Where we started on this project, last fall? Last fall, yeah. So where we are now, it's gone from here to here. So we're real pleased, and staff has really given a lot of good comments and suggestions to make this thing work. So that's the 6B and C overview, and I'm not going to provide any alternative language because we're still working on it. So, to wrap it up, conclusion. You know, as I stated, we do implement the comprehensive plan. We meet the code 4-400 in terms of criteria. You know, okay, to prove zoning and CPD, you've got to meet the comprehensive plan. We're there. Our recommended conditions and our project itself is consistent with the BBR vision plan, they are reasonable for a CPD based upon the definition of a CPD in 4-299. So check that one off. We're designed to accommodate the project to meet code standards and the standards that we can't meet. We have 5 deviations, and those deviations are more than reasonable. They benefit the project. They protect public safety and welfare. Staff recommends them. We agree with that. So check that one off. As Jolene pointed out, you know, we comply with 490, the new one. We're consistent with the long-range pedestrian bicycle master plan, and so that's couldn't find the code, but it's resolution 1703. And we're compatible with the neighborhood. We're compatible with natural resources. We won't cause nuisances because of all the things that we've talked about. And we're entitled to zoning for 131. So with that in mind, we're open up to answer your questions.
Have any questions from the board?
I have one. How does Taco Mix, what are their feelings on the closed driveway there on Bonita Beach Road? Have they expressed any thoughts on that? Just curious.
I'm not sure.
Not to me.
Okay.
For the record, Jacqueline Genson, what our condition was intending to do if in the future the city and Lee County decide to close that driveway, how would we provide access for that property and also coordinate future interconnection?
Okay.
So that's the whole purpose of the discussion.
Right.
The city or the county has not approached Taco Mix about closing their driveway.
Okay. All right.
I have you've got a pretty well-defined plan here. One thing I was looking for, and I didn't see, if you're gonna have RV storage and boat storage and perhaps automobile storage, you're gonna have a lot of trash, and I don't see a provision of where the trash is gonna go. Especially I'm concerned about trash like oils and chemicals that might be used and how that's gonna be disposed of on this property. Obviously, we don't want it spilled onto the ground, and I didn't see, or maybe it's on here, but I can't define where your trash is going.
Right there, that's the service area. Okay, so that's where the public pickup will be. Then each unit will have its own trash receptacle, if you will. And I know, I forgot, was it you, Sam? Well, anyway, in terms of revising our covenants and restrictions, we're going to have prohibitions about hazardous waste. In terms of changing oil, we're already prohibiting that, but that'll be dealt with. So physically, there's a combination there, then internal, and then the prohibitions, hopefully, we'll deal with.
Hazardous waste is the word I was trying to find. Thank you.
And if I may, for the record, condition 3D outlines the hazardous waste concerns. And Michael Kirby's here. He's actually, the term is HAZWOPER certified, so he can answer any questions that you might have relative to that.
You're
Certified what, Mike? Okay, there we go.
So the question would be, Mike Kirby, are you satisfied with the, satisfied with the disposal methods? Mike? Just to follow up, sorry.
Mike Kirby, Senior Environmental Specialist, Community Development. Yes, we talked about this, and what we talked about was you may have antifreeze in a container there. So we talked about things like that. That's hazardous waste. But in the material safety data sheet for antifreeze, it says you can just store it in a cool, dry place. So we actually worked with Audrey and to condition this in such a way that these minor hazardous waste that are stored properly may be used, and it's just a matter of degree.
What about fuels, gasoline?
Lee County still requires SQG permits, small quantity generator permits for any facilities.
Yeah, there's a threshold there, and I don't believe these guys are gonna come near
They
the
won't
threshold
trip
for
it.
that. Correct. I worked for the Pollution Control Department for Collier County for 3 years, and I did those. So I know how many gallons a month you need to generate to do that.
And that's a requirement of your business license receipt. When you come in for a use permit, you're reviewed to see if you are going to be a small quantity SQ means small quantity generator. Obviously, anything of a larger or regular generator has different requirements. But it is reviewed at that time by Natural Resources.
Yeah, Lee County and DEP take the lead role. In Collier, we were delegated that responsibility, but DEP or Lee County will take the lead.
I'd like to take it one step further if I can. How are you going to regulate what these owners store in their units? I mean, who's going to monitor that? You know, a small amount of fluid can cause a fire as well as a large amount of fluid can cause a fire.
We believe.
And, one second, Mike, and as in regards to that, I don't see anything where it says anything about firefighting equipment, you know, pumps or anything. I don't see anything over here on this. Fire extinguishers, anything, nothing. Sand, nothing. I don't see anything listed on there for that.
Sure. And if I may, Jacqueline Genson, again, for the record, our condition 3D is worded as, at time of local development order, we want to see a copy of their covenants and restrictions. And Bonita Springs Fire, Lee County will be on those reviews to review those restrictions to make sure that those situations are addressed and that they're comfortable. So we cited not only the data sheets for the EPA regulations, but also the National Fire Protection Association regulations, because we are aware that there could be concerns about chemical mixing and things like that and storage of these items, and especially because it's a condominium. We want to make sure it's very clear in their documents so the owners are held accountable and the association is held accountable to ameliorate those concerns.
But these problems could also happen in a single-family residence garage.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
or regular
But there you're talking about a single family, here you're talking about multi-storage facilities. I mean, you know, fire spreads.
1 minute.
Yeah,
I just got handed, so I want to share this with you. There will most likely be code inspections. So for rentals, for different businesses, there are annual inspections by the fire department and possibly our own code enforcement department. And things like gasoline, that needs to be still stored in a ventilated area. So I don't actually anticipate they would store any gasoline in there. But a bottle of, a gallon of antifreeze is a little different. It seals up tightly, so we tried to address that.
Will the development have containment pads for placement of anything like antifreeze? In other words, pads where if there is a spill, if it happens in that particular area, it's easily contained?
We actually didn't get that far. In the material safety data sheet for the few items we checked on, they didn't require a certain concrete bottom. The plastic container was good enough for these everyday
Right, so if you have
chemicals.
used oil, for example, and it's not at a residential, there are requirements for containment, diesel.
Absolutely.
one more question. Would it be feasible for them to have a fuel dump? In other words, where they can pour their antifreeze, their used oil, the gasoline that they haven't used? I mean, you see that more and more with storage facilities where they put a waste oil spot for a container, a 55-gallon drum, whatever. But they make provisions for the people that rent the units that they can get rid of small quantities of oil or, like you say, antifreeze and so forth. Do you have any provisions for that? Or do you intend to make any provisions for that? I'm just
Can I make a
questioning.
suggestion in 3D, just add a sentence, basically that the applicant will coordinate with Lee County Natural Resources and Florida Department of Environmental Protection for amnesty days or for
Okay.
removal
Mm-hmm.
of materials.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Larry?
First, Ms. Genson, thank you so much for this very fulsome presentation. I find it much easier to make a decision with the kind of materials you and the applicant provided. I have two questions. The first, on page 10 of the staff report, it deals with the active gopher tortoise burrow that's there. And I noticed that the applicant doesn't have to deal with this until the back end of the process. And that seemed to me a bit unfair. They spend all this money, they go through all this thing, and then at the very last stage, somebody can come in and say, we can't do this. Can you help me out with that?
Mike Kirby again.
Yes, Mike.
The way this works is at the plan development stage, we just plan for listed species, gopher tortoises, indigo snakes, just whatever. And then at the development order stage, when they're ready to break ground, then they get their permits. But we know ahead of time, say in this area, it's an urban area, and it's justified to use the site and to move 1 or 2 tortoises. So there's kind of a threshold that we use that it's really worth it to save them there and make a preserve, or if it's an urban area, they really shouldn't be there, and it's okay to move them somewhere else.
So it's not going to be a problem, is what you're
Correct.
saying?
Yes.
Okay. My second question is for the applicant. I couldn't help but notice the exchange of, there was an exchange of emails with, on page 111, 112 of the staff report, with Sam Vincent and Mr. Stewart, who I think was commenting on the Lockwood report.
Yeah.
And Mr. Stewart made the point that he was very nervous or concerned that this board follow the law and not offer their subjective opinions. I think he's correct. So would you please tell me why you're asking us not to follow the law by asking for 5 deviations, which by definition, we're not following the law. You're asking us to deviate from the law. They're permitted, and normally I have no problem with it, but you specifically asked us not to do that, not to be subjective.
Well, actually.
How do you reconcile those two?
Well, I won't get into Ian Lockwood's issue, but I will say that I've seen this happen before in projects where you work and you have outside consultants, that come in and they don't understand, the actual regulatory context and the history and so forth and so on. So I'll set that aside. But deviations, in fact, are they're specific. And Audrey, I was looking for the actual code standard, but it's not in violation of the law. What deviations are, and it's identical to variances in terms of providing an avenue if, in fact, the code is too restrictive and encumbers to the effect that it's a detriment to the project, although it still has to balance, public health, safety, and welfare standards. Deviation to those standards can be obtained.
No question.
Yeah.
But it does require subjective thinking about it.
Well, I guess everything requires,
Right?
rational,
And
objective,
that
and
was the very
subjective.
thing
Yes.
that
yes.
you were opposed to.
Well, I was just concerned that there were some topics that were being brought up that just were not in the code.
Enough said. Okay. I am concerned, more concerned with Mr. Lockwood's comments about potential illegality and so on. Isn't he supposed to know the statute? And I don't understand
Not necessarily.
when he's claiming he's hoping that this will be illegal, and that's a little harsh, wouldn't you say? A little bit
The city
unfair.
can, the city manager can control its employees, its consultants. Sometimes they have a right to sometimes maybe say things that might not be how I would word things. But, that's his thought process, and at least it's very transparent where his thoughts are. But he is not testifying here today. In fact, we do need to have Ms. Genson testify along with the rest of the staff. We haven't started the staff presentation yet. But she can convey and provide testimony as to what we think the application presents.
And if I may, Mr. Kurlander, we have discussed, Mr. Lockwood, how to make his comments more diplomatic, because they will become part of the record. So, and not only because he has very good thoughts and ideas that we can present and consider for land development code changes, but the fact is, with the zoning matter, we have to review the request based on the laws that are in effect.
Thank you.
Yes,
Chairman?
James?
I have a couple of questions. If you go to page 13 of your presentation, I appreciate the complexity of the cross easements and how you've tried to address them.
Yes. And that's it.
Oh,
That's it.
Buffering?
now one more.
13?
Yes. Deviation 4, I have a little bit of a problem with. Obviously, in order for that to be a possible cross easement at that point, the building would have to come out. The existing building would have, taco building would have to come out. But if you would have a cross easement, that could dump people from the west tract into your secured area. Yeah, right there. How would that work?
Well, it wouldn't. It's a problem, but that's why, again, we appreciate how staff work with us on that, because what the triggering mechanism is let's say if this is built and then down the line it's for some reason it doesn't work, or it's demolished, it's an office building or a small apartment complex, that's when that would trigger in. So both this has to be redeveloped to another use,
Right.
and this. So, as it is now, a connection would be disastrous. No one would buy those
Okay.
units.
All right,
Yes.
I understand that now.
Yes.
Thank you for that explanation. Additionally, on page 15 of the staff report, where we talk about an easement across the front on policy 1.7.4, the second paragraph, the last sentence about donating an easement to be able to build that cross section, which would be needed, and I understand that. Now, my question is, why would that not be a condition as opposed to something later as they go through the LDO process you would require? It could be missed, is my point. If it's a condition, it wouldn't be missed.
Right, we do have language in condition, let's see. Okay, condition 6D, the last sentence. What I put in there.
What page are you on,
Oh, I'm sorry,
Jacqueline?
sir. Page 18.
Page what?
Page 18 at the top of the page. It's
Okay.
the first paragraph, the last sentence. And what I put is, if Public Works generally agrees with the cross-section as proposed, the applicant will donate an easement for the bikeway at time of local development order. And what I tried to do is build in flexibility, because the city right now, as many of you know, the Bonita Beach Road Vision Amendments were approved However, there is a challenge pending. We are currently working on our Land Development Code amendments to implement those regulations, of course, pending what happens with the comprehensive plan amendments. So while we work through that process and go ahead and design the cross sections, if the cross section changes, you know, if our vision wants the path a different way, or if they want it entirely within the right of way, I wanted to provide the flexibility to accommodate that condition. Because I don't think the city, we don't know right now what those cross sections will ultimately look like. So it really was to put in there just some flexibility. You know, by the time that this project is ready to break ground and put in the improvements, does Public Works really want to go ahead with that multi-use trail on that location, or do they want to collect a pay-in or fee-in-lieu fund? So it's really just to go ahead and provide flexibility so the project's not hamstringed in the event that the city has alternate plans to implement the multi-use
Okay.
path.
I understand. I appreciate that. I just wanted to make sure it didn't get
Sure, I understand.
passed over as the LDO process comes down later. Okay. Can we make a recommendation relative to the architectural?
Absolutely.
I would like to recommend that the old Florida style be required and eliminate the other two. The more modern alternates.
Correct.
Although I understand they're very nice designs, but the old Florida, in my opinion, really falls into the context of what we're trying to create along Bonita Beach Road.
And what I did was, of course, we wanted to go ahead and respect the applicant's wishes to show all of the different elevations that were proposed and the alternates. Staff is recommending the old Florida style. That was our recommendation, but again, of course, if this board or city council had a different opinion as to what's appropriate, you're more than welcome to make that recommendation and decision.
Okay.
So attachment B actually is the old Florida style, and that was staff's recommendation, but you can definitely make the language more restrictive, but it does reference the attachment B for the old Florida style.
Okay, so that would be a requirement if we approve the existing conditions as you have presented.
That is correct, sir.
Okay, and of
Again,
course,
again,
the council can change that.
Of course.
Okay.
And again, allowing some flexibility that we want the design generally, or sorry, consistent with that, but again, with the vision amendments, if there's a recommendation through our consultant to have additional architectural treatments in terms of amount of window glazing and storefronts and access to the pathways, we wanted to make sure that we weren't hamstringing ourselves if there were future amendments based on the Bonita Beach Road LDC code changes that are forthcoming.
Okay. I think that satisfies that. That would be for everybody's first choice. Okay. Another question. You mentioned a 5x10 sign on Bonita Beach Road. Although I didn't see where it was to be located.
Yeah. 5x10 monument sign,
Yes.
right there.
Okay. I missed that. Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Anybody else?
If you could put up the site plan again quickly, I have a question on that. That's good. We don't have the benefit of any dimensions on that, so my question is that if I had a 50-foot RV, or if I had a 25-foot boat on a trailer and I had to back it in to one of these units, we have an issue of turning radiuses and, back up, but it seems that some of those units would be easy to back into, some of them maybe not, but maybe all of them are. I can't tell. I guess my question is, does your engineering work take into account those large turning radiuses to accommodate the larger vehicles?
Yes, and for example, Al, this is 45 feet? 45 foot Al? Yeah, so for example, just for scaling, that's 45, and that's 45. This is tighter. You're right, this building would be the problematic one in terms of having larger units, larger vehicles
Right.
and stuff.
Right,
But other than that, it can work, yes.
okay. Another question I had was that I noticed somewhere in this write-up that under the Bonita Beach Road visioning plan that the bike path will be on the south side of Bonita Beach Road, and we have a bike path on the north side that doesn't, or might not connect to anything in the future. What is this thinking about two bike paths, or what's going to happen?
For the record, Jacqueline Genson, we have on the update to the pedestrian bicycle master plan that McMahon and Associates had done for the city earlier this year does show a separated bike facility, most likely on the south side of Bonita Beach Road, up to a certain point, and it's, I believe, just west of this property. And again, I think through the vision amendments, we'll further define when that when that bike path will terminate on the south side, and then go ahead and pick up through the multi-use trail cross-section on the north side of Bonita Beach Road. In the Bonita Beach Road Vision final report, there was not a designated cross-section per se in the report that showed what the beach section would look like, although it was provided in narrative form. So I think that will be further defined as we move through the LDC amendments.
Okay. Thank you. And I guess my last question is that if you could show the section drawing on Bonita Beach Roads that shows the landscaping and the street. Oop. One more. That's the one, right? No. The building, I believe, is 25 to 24 feet high.
Yeah, 24 feet, yes.
Right, from grade, and so that would mean it's even higher from the center line of the road. And the trees that are drawn, as they're drawn would be a great, there's an architectural relationship between the landscaping and the building. My question is, when those trees go in, are they going to be planted that size, or are you hoping they're going to grow to that size?
The code requires 14-foot plantings, so those will be put in. Then one of the conditions is a 20-foot live oak, one 20-foot live oak, and then for a mitigation pine that'll be on that won't be on Bonita Beach Road. That'll be a 22-inch. Did I say 22? Yeah, excuse me, a 22-inch mitigation pine, but that won't be on Bonita Beach Road. But there will be a 20-foot oak tree installed, and then the other trees will be at 14 feet installed.
So those are drawn at 14 feet?
Yes,
Okay, and that's what will go in initially?
yes.
All right, thank you.
22 inches.
Question.
22 inches?
Is there no need on this site for water retention?
There's a water condition.
Yes, and
Did I miss it?
Number 9. 9 and 10.
I'm sorry. 9? Okay. However, I don't see on their site plan space for that.
Good morning. For the record, Al Quattrone with Quattrone and Associates. Given the limited green space we have and the elevations we work with, we're going to be exploring underground detention areas, exfiltration areas for the bulk of our water management. And and we're working with BSU right now to put some drainage or dry detention in their easement area as well. So most likely the bulk of it again will be through these chambers that go underneath the parking lot and perk back into the ground.
That satisfies staff?
For the record, Jacqueline Genson, yes, because what our concern was, and we can discuss it more in our presentation, is we're concerned about a dry detention system around the perimeter of the site with the buildings and how the plantings would look, if you will. So we're very satisfied with a more finished look, maybe use of exfiltration or underground chambers, so it does not jeopardize the aesthetics of the building and the impact on the landscaping.
Thank you. No, nothing further.
Anybody else? No. Staff?
Good morning. For the record, Jacqueline Genson with Community Development. I will try not to be duplicative where appropriate. Staff does agree with the applicant's presentation. And as a matter to start, I would like to go ahead and formally enter the staff report and the attachments that I handed out into the record. And then for the zoning board's edification, with the handouts I do sincerely apologize. There was one page that did not make it into the staff report during reproduction, and that is the Ian Lockwood memo, our email correspondence, which you do have a copy before you. As always, I'd like to go ahead and acknowledge and recognize the team that reviewed this application. So listed before you is just the variety of agencies that had input through the sufficiency process. Some of them are in attendance today, but obviously for attendance purposes, we couldn't have some of the other agencies or staff here present at the meeting, but all their comments are outlined thoroughly throughout the sufficiency comments and the staff report write-up and the conditions of approval. And as Ms. Vance stated earlier, we have Terrell Airline who is on the phone. The request, again, of boilerplate language of how the applicant is requesting a rezone for the self-storage use from a C1 zoning designation. Staff did recommend approval with conditions. As I like to do now is with the staff reports, we definitely want to have a very educational and open dialogue with the board and with the public. So as you'll see, there's a lot of hyperlinks and explanation in terms of what the plan development rezoning process entails, what the intent and the purpose of the plan development districts are, along with some hyperlinks so the public and the boards understand the criteria that staff reviews all these applications against, and how we do come through the process and formulate our recommendation based on the requests submitted to us. Outside counsel Terrell Airline did join us through this application process. The application was submitted in the summer of last year based on coordination with special counsel. They helped us review the application at the tail end just because of when they have come on board to assist us with these applications. So Mr. Arline provided review and input to staff in our May substantive comment letter and also through the staff report and condition writing process. Citywide location map. This is located in the western portion of the city on Bonita Beach Road. Just to give you a better point of reference, you have Bonita Beach Road to the south, and then Collier County, Okeana Street to the west, Vanda Drive to the north, and then we have a vacant property to the east and Imperial River Road also to the east. The future land use map, current zoning, and subject use of the property, the applicant went over in detail. It's located in the general commercial land use classification. The property is zoned C1, but is also located in our Bonita Beach Road corridor overlay, which outlines certain uses that require plan development rezoning if they exceed an acre in size. Going over the surrounding property analysis, this is looking north, and as the applicant provided in their presentation, this is a view of the neighborhood to the north of you. You have this duplex residential home in this corner, this duplex residential home, which is right here, and then on this corner, this is just a view corridor looking to the northwest, and there's several duplexes to the north along Okeana Street. The land use classification is medium-density residential. That was intended to go ahead and memorialize an existing pattern of development of single-family and duplex residential units at 11.6 dwelling units an acre. The zoning is two-family conservation. It's an old zoning designation that, again, also recognizes duplex development patterns. The property to the east is right here before you. It is zoned CS1 and CC. A CS1 district is an older zoning district. It does act as a buffer between residential uses and your more intense commercial uses. The CC district does allow a variety of commercial uses. The property to the east has been subject of several pre-application meeting requests. The latest request was consisted of a hotel and multi-family mixed-use project, along with some supplemental beach parking. The application has not been filed with our office, but just to let you know some of the development discussions that we have had on that property, and why some of the conditions we have in place are contemplating planning into the future. Surrounding property to the west, as the applicant stated, is the existing Taco Mex restaurant, and then a smaller convenience and beverage store. And then on the other side of Okeana Street to the west, you do have the Flamingo Motel, which consists of a single-story and two-story hotel-motel units. And then you have on the other side of that to the north and the west, the Beach Walk properties. And those are condominiums. However, a lot of them are marketed for vacation rentals. The property to the south, you have Bonita Beach Road to the south, which is Lee County owned and maintained. And then you have the jurisdiction of Collier County. The land use classification for that area is urban residential. And then the zoning is a C4 zoning designation, which is a more intense commercial pattern development in the Collier County Land Development Code. And the development patterns that consist in that area are restaurants, a small retail strip center with a variety of personal service uses, such as a pharmacy, hair salon, etc. History and existing entitlements. This property was formerly a self-service car wash. The structure was demolished last year, and now the property is vacant. As part of the car wash development permit in the 90s, there was a requirement to go ahead and require cross-access for the property to the east. So that remains in place, and as the applicant stated, they are more than willing to go ahead to amend and extend that cross-access easement. The property is zoned C1 in the Bonita Beach Road corridor, and to give you some history on this application and this property, the property owners have met with staff several times, not only for this use, but a variety of other uses. There was a question on whether or not the site could be appropriate for workforce housing, a retail commercial center. So they have vetted a lot of different types of uses to repurpose this property since it is an infill site. And ultimately, as you know today, they have the request in for the self-storage use. Regarding the Bonita Beach Road corridor and Bonita Beach Road vision plan, again, the corridor overlay was established in 2001 based on a study that was prepared by Lee County Community Development that went ahead and promulgated a comprehensive plan policy regarding implementing the study findings, which then went ahead and processed and approved land development code amendments to implement those recommendations in that study. And then we have last year the Bonita Beach Road Visioning Final Report that was done by Tool Design Group, which is an effort to better coordinate land use and transportation planning, and also the establishment of different zones based on location within the city along this corridor. And that final study was used as data and analysis to support the Bonita Beach Road Vision Plan amendments and the Quadrant Plan amendments that have been adopted again by City Council but are now pending a challenge by a third party. I wanted to go ahead and give you a history on the evolution of the master concept plan as originally submitted. So this is the first master concept plan that was presented to us by staff. And what was proposed was a retail building with a drive-through use and then self-storage in the back. And as you can imagine, staff had a lot of concerns with this plan as proposed. So this is when we issued our first insufficiency letter. And when the plan was resubmitted, it then reverted to a single-use self-storage project, similar to what we have before us today, with the building orientation along Vanda Drive, and then along the sides of the property line with parking up against Bonita Beach Road. And again, based on the vision that the staff was working on in the city, we provided some more comments, which then were incorporated into this drawing before you. And then at this time, this is when the property owners had changed consultants, so you'll see a little difference in the graphics. But the applicant really tried to work with staff's comments relative to orienting the buildings to the front, structuring the buffers appropriately so we could still respect the neighborhood to the north. And then this is the current master concept plan as proposed. And again, it's a single-use plan development. The building orientation is designed in such where the backs of buildings are attractive. They act as buffers. The overhead doors are internal to the site. It is a gated facility. So in terms of stacking concerns, they went ahead and moved the access further to the north, and also agreed to provide cross-access entry and extend that access agreement, and then also locating the location of the dumpster further away from the building so there weren't fire code and separation issues. So again, really trying to work with staff to address our concerns. The property development regulations are also contained on the master concept plan, so I went ahead and clipped those out for you so you could see their proposal in terms of their setbacks. As Mr. Stewart stated, they are exceeding the open space requirements that are typically associated with commercial projects and commercial plan developments. And then they have their general notes, just providing a little bit of flexibility if they need to make a tweak here and there at time of local development orders, they could go ahead and do so. But overall, they need to meet the intent of this drawing before you. The schedule of uses, that's enumerated in condition 2 of the staff report for your review. Wanted to go over what we outlined in the staff report, that this use is definitely very unique in nature. As defined in our land development code, we have a definition of mini warehouse, or we have warehouse public. And the main distinction really is, are these offered for rent? And in this case, we have a unique concept that's entering into the market, where you have these storage units that are sold individually in the form of a condominium. So based on our current definitions, the Land Development Code does allow the director to go ahead and classify the use based on other uses in the Land Development Code, of which are most similar in nature. So that's what we explained in the staff report in terms of the use is very similar to mini warehouse and public warehouse in terms of storing, having dead storage and storage of private goods. But the main difference is that these will be done, will be purchased and be held in private ownership and managed through an association. So again, the conditions are outlined in condition 2, and then any concerns we had relative to compatibility and adjusting and fitting into the existing neighborhood, noise concerns, external impacts, we went ahead and placed in condition 3 for uses, and then condition 4 for architectural. Going over the architectural evolution process. This was originally an elevation that was submitted to staff back in the fall of last year, giving us an idea of the type of architecture that they were contemplating. This is actually the location in Collier County called My Other Place. It's off of Old 41, just south of the city limits, next to the Cordova Spanish Wells community. And it definitely is a more modern style architecture. And staff had some reservations implementing this design based on the location of the property with the existing residential patterns to the north and the existing patterns to the east and west. So when the applicant switched engineering firms and planners, they also went ahead and contracted with Southview Studios, and they were working with Sam Vincent, the city architect, on other alternatives for consideration. These are two that were submitted to our office for review. And as you saw in the backup, there was extensive dialogue between Mr. Vincent and Ms. Dara regarding the design. And this was the other alternative that we asked that they want to go ahead and explore. And staff recommends this elevation based on the existing architectural theme in this portion of the city. You'll see, again, this is the Beach Walk development. This is another development that's on the south side of Collier County. And then this is an architectural rendering for the Bonita Village project that was approved by council last year. And you're really seeing more of those old Florida architectural themes coming through in these elevations. So it was our recommendation that the old Florida style be the design that was ultimately chosen for this project. But of course, that is staff's recommendation. The board can definitely have other considerations recommended. So in terms of orientation and Bonita Beach Road frontage, the visioning amendments that were adopted earlier this year dealt with a network zone map and quadrant zone maps. It incorporates the beach zone narrative that Toll Design Group envisioned in the study. As we attached into the backup, Ian Lockwood was a review entity on the project. I can go over some of his comments in more detail, but again, the use in itself, it is a use that the applicant can go ahead and request, and if he meets the findings outlined in the Land Development Code, he has every right to go ahead to due process for us to evaluate the request based on the codes that are adopted right now and in place. The other items that we reviewed again were the bicycle and pedestrian plan, and the applicant is willing and has agreed to incorporate the multi-use path along the frontage of their property, not within the right-of-way, but actually on their property. The Toll Design Group comments, going in detail, Mr. Lockwood had a concern with the use itself because it is not an active use, it's very passive. So he's looking at more ways to activate a street, make streets come alive, make it a public place. But at the same time, this type of use is compatible with this area because you do have a neighborhood to the north of you. Bonita Beach Road during season is very congested. So to have a use like this helps reduce trips on the road. So there are some advantages to having this type of use blended into other active uses that we might want to see along this corridor. There was a comment about eliminating Bonita Beach Road access, which is an existing access the property owner has right now. Lee County, again, is the owner and maintainer of Bonita Beach Road. They had no objections to maintaining the Bonita Beach Road access so long as cross-access was given and maintained to the property to the east. And of course, based on the master concept plan, there are multiple interconnections available. There was concerns by Mr. Lockwood about having prohibition of monument signs and landscape and dictating certain landscape materials. But again, we can only enforce necessarily what's in our land development code right now. You can recommend a condition that's not stated in the land development code if you find that it's necessary to meet the public health, safety, welfare, if it enhances the plan development, things of that nature based on the findings and criteria for rezonings. At that time, you can condition something that's above and beyond the code requirement. So again, we're trying to balance wants and desires of the consultant based on what regulatorily we are required or what we can require. So what staff did find is, aside from Mr. Ian Lockwood's comments, is how else were they consistent with the vision? And based on those elements, we found them consistent with the vision because they are implementing building orientation towards the frontage. They've went ahead and employed architectural articulation to go ahead and make it inviting. They've incorporated the multi-use path. They have a multitude of landscape plantings that makes it very inviting. So in those respects, we found that they are meeting the intent of the Bonita Beach Road vision. Regarding access and connectivity, what this exhibit is meant to show is the turning movements. So they'll have a right in, right out onto Bonita Beach Road. Future interconnect to the east, possible future interconnect, if there's redevelopment on both parcels, to the west, a right in, right out on Vanda Drive, and then hoping for an interconnection along Vanda Drive when this property redevelops. So again, coordinating multiple ways for interconnection as a way to distribute trips, not only for this project, but the other projects moving forward in the future. Again, with connectivity, Chapter 3 has requirements where an application at time of local development order must comply with the bicycle pedestrian master plan, which was updated earlier this year. So as you can see, the applicant is making every attempt to go ahead and meet that land development code requirement. Another condition that we have in the staff report is for a protected crossing at the Bonita Beach Road driveway access. That is a recommendation that you find in the Bonita Beach Road final report by Tool Design Group. So we've recommended that condition. Going over deviation 1, again, the applicant staff agrees with their justification of the stacking requirement here in this location. This is a lower traffic generator or traveled pathway, if you will. There's only one driveway on Vanda Drive, so staff was comfortable with that deviation request to reduce the required stacking. Deviation 2 deals with the buffer, and really what this boils down to is the width of the buffer and where the plantings will be placed. They're not reducing the number of plantings, the number of plantings, just the distance in which they're planted in. And what makes this challenging is, as they stated, there is a BSU easement here, and there are utilities under the pavement. We had extensive talks with the applicant and Bonita Springs Utilities on if they could go ahead and tear up some of the pavement and install more plantings and trees, but Bonita Springs Utilities is very particular in what you can plant near their utilities. So we kind of came to an impasse, and they went ahead and redesigned the buildings and pushed them further inward so they could go ahead and put in a greater buffer, meeting the storage buffering requirements that were passed earlier this year. Same with Okeana Street, again, going ahead and putting in the buffers here and preserving and incorporating the heritage trees that were recommended to be preserved by the Tree Advisory Board. Deviation 3A and 3B deals with the access locations on Bonita Beach Road. Again, it's an existing driveway. Lee County had no objections to this condition. However, they also have their own deviation review process that they will administer at time of their development order for the access connection separation. 3B deals with the access connection separation of Vanda Drive and the existing driveway into Bonita Beach Walk. Again, existing conditions, so staff recommended approval. Condition 4 deals with the future interconnection to the west. So staff recommended approval for that, subject to these properties being redeveloped in the future. We wanted to preserve our right for interconnectivity should both properties redevelop. Deviation 5 is the self-storage buffer requirements and the berming for Bonita Beach Road. Staff is in agreement with the applicant's deviation request. The intent really was, when we created these buffer standards, to address our more suburban style development with Bonita Beach Road, looking to transform it into a multi-use corridor. The implementation of berms higher than 1 to 2 feet really impedes the ability to go ahead and install the multi-use path. So we are in agreement with the deviation request set before us. Environmental review, Mr. Kirby did review this application, and there was a questionnaire asked about the gopher tortoises, or the gopher tortoise that was found on site. And then when we did do a site visit earlier this year, the burrow was unoccupied. The sands, they're Immokalee sand and Daytona sand, so they're very dry sands. They don't hold water for long. And Stuart Smith and Mike Kirby can answer any extra questions on those. As we stated before, this application and master concept plan did go before the Tree Advisory Board earlier this year, where they made recommendations, and the applicant has agreed to incorporate those recommendations into their plans, and they are also conditions of approval. Again, the environmental review and buffering. Mr. Stewart already went over this in his presentation, and Mike Kirby can go over these in detail if you would like. But again, this is just essentially showing how they're meeting the intent of the vision and the Land Development Code supplemental buffering requirements in Chapter 4. And this is showing the Okeana cross-section, Vanda Drive, and then the BSU easement to the east. Engineering, for engineering, this plan development, because it was not a major plan development, did not require a surface water management plan narrative. But again, with our discussions on how we were concerned with buffers being used for dry detention and the aesthetic consequences it could affect, we did discuss a little bit of what they envisioned for their stormwater management system. So we have that information. We did coordinate with Lee County DOT on the access connection. We have a condition in the staff report for extra water quality treatment. That's an implementing condition, so we can implement the comprehensive plan provisions for water quality treatment. The property is located in an X zone, and their water management permit will have to demonstrate consistency so it can be designed for the 5, 25, and 100-year storm. And again, we're hoping that there's a use of chambering or some type of exfiltration trench system for their surface water management so we don't impact the landscaping appearance. Surrounding property and compatibility, as explained earlier, this is a low traffic trip generator use. They are implementing the code required buffering standards for self-storage facilities adjacent to residential and rights-of-ways. The buildings are being used also as buffers in effect. They'll be designed with primary facade-like standards. And again, they're implementing bicycle connectivity. The project did meet public notice requirements per our administrative code and state statutes, so we did mail notices to all properties within 375 feet. The property was also posted with a sign on Bonita Beach Road, one on Okeana, one on Vanda Street, and I did not receive any inquiries into the case before you today. Consistency with the Bonita plan. Again, Mr. Stewart did a thorough job on the comprehensive plan analysis, so I'll only go into those areas he didn't cover. She covered the height and the general commercial land use and compatibility with the use of the buffers and the site design. We think all of the compatibility concerns are mitigated. There are available services to the site. Again, Bonita Springs Utility was a party to this application, Lee County DOT, and also Lee County Solid Waste. So all of the main utility providers were review entities, and they had no objections and do have service available. They are implementing the bike facilities pedestrian plan and offered to put some of those improvements on their property. This property is located in the coastal high hazard area as defined on the older map that was originally approved with the comprehensive plan. So based on that analysis, this is an infill project. The intensity is consistent with the surrounding neighborhood, so it is consistent with that goal of the comprehensive plan. And in terms of resource protection, with the gopher tortoise that may be on the site, may not be on the site, there is a process with Florida Fish and Wildlife to go ahead and address those concerns. Conditions of approval, if you would like for me to go over those individually, I'd be happy to do so. I see a nod, so I'll go ahead and do that. Starts on page 16. Condition 1 deals with consistency of the master concept plan and then also lists the intensity that they are requesting, so it just memorializes the use. Condition 2 goes over the schedule of uses, and what you'll see is a listing of accessory uses, such as the parking to park the use, the gates, because they are requesting this be a private gated facility, and signs. So those are all accessory uses to the primary use. The administrative office is limited only to sale and maintain this facility. It's not for a separate business. Essential services and essential service facilities are your water meters, any type of utility service to go ahead and support the use that's on the property. Excavation water retention deals with if they need to excavate for any reason to provide their water management system. Fences and walls, that's self-explanatory. And then the self-storage facility and mini warehouse uses to memorialize essentially the use that they're requesting, regardless that's in a condominium format versus a rental format. The property development regulations, we simply reference attachment A, which is the master concept plan, where those those development regulations are in print. The use restrictions are what we talked about earlier in the presentation. And what we tried to do was address the uses that we don't want these private entities to conduct. So no auto repair, boat repair, or repair of similar uses. We don't want a business operating out of these units. We do not want the open storage, display, or sale of merchandise on this property. And then, of course, Condition 3D deals with the HAZWOPER information in terms of the storage of hazardous materials or chemicals. And we want their covenants and restrictions provided to us at time of local development order so we can review those and also distribute it to the other review agencies. Condition 4 pertains to the architectural, which in this case we are recommending the old Florida style. Condition 5 deals with the landscaping and buffering, with specific call-outs to the Bonita Beach Road buffer, the Vanda Drive buffer, the requirement of the 14-foot trees at time of installation, and then the incorporation of the heritage trees based on the Tree Advisory Board's recommendation. Condition 6 deals with the access and interconnectivity, and as Mr. Stewart explained, staff is still working with them on condition 6B and 6C. But 6A, that deals with extending the existing cross-access easement in this area here. That's what 6A pertains to. 6B pertains to the access easement requirement for this connection to the west. 6C, what that deals with is, since this is a gated facility, and they're proposing for this to be an in and out on Bonita Beach Road, if this property redevelops, say it's the hotel, say it's a parking lot for beach parking, we want to make sure that this use, when they interconnect, that there's not a queuing or traffic problem if a unit owner wants to go ahead and bring in their big RV or bring in a boat and say the width or the length is about 50 to 75 feet. We don't want traffic backing up on Bonita Beach Road. So that's really our consternation with how do we address the ingress and egress for the storage use so we make sure there's not a queuing problem on Bonita Beach Road or any type of vehicular conflicts at this cross-access point. So just to give you some background on that. 6D talks about the interconnection to this property here. And again, until this property owner comes in, we're not sure what's going to develop on the site or if this is going to be preserved, but we want to maintain that right and flexibility for an interconnection. This is a request between staff and the applicant on changes for conditions 6B and 6C, but again, we're still working on this, so you're welcome to see what our latest thoughts are on their proposed changes. That's 6B. 6C, again, this was with the gated entry about changing it to an exit only. But if they submit a traffic impact statement or traffic analysis that shows that there's no queuing conditions or conflicts, then we would agree to allow them to have the entry and exit off of Bonita Beach Road. So we're still working through the wording on that, but just to let you know what our concerns are. And the rest of condition 6, because it's long and I apologize, but it's, again, acknowledging the 8-foot multi-use path on their property. And again, if the city does not, if our cross sections, once they're adopted, don't envision the multi-use pathway on private property and instead in the right-of-way, there's an option for a fund in lieu option, which is outlined in our land development code right now. And then 6G is the protected driveway crossing. Condition 7, Those are Lee County Department of Transportation conditions, where they're putting them on notice that you need a Lee County DOT permit to modify the driveway. We're gonna look at cross-access. You need a deviation request from the county for the access separation. And then there's an existing Lee Trans stop in this area, so when they come in for development order, they'll have to upgrade the Lee Trans stop. Condition 8 is your transportation TIS guideline reference. Condition 9 is our drainage analysis condition for the storm events. Condition 10 is our water quality condition. Condition 11 is the signage, and as the applicant stated, they are amenable to conditioning themselves to a smaller sign than what our code requires. So we are memorializing that into a condition for the monument signage. And then there's a condition on wall signage. Again, because of the proximity of the residential, we wanted to make sure that any glare or illumination wouldn't be a nuisance to those property owners. Condition 12 and 13, as I like to call them, are boilerplate conditions. We don't have a mandate for a property to be Florida Green Building or LEED certified, but we definitely encourage that. Condition 13 is consistency with the Land Development Code, because Land Development Code changes happen. So they have to demonstrate consistency with all Land Development Code provisions at time of development order. And then 14, essentially, same goes with our comprehensive plan. If changes occur in our comprehensive plan and they come in later for a development order, they have to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. But there is specification regarding the Bonita Beach Road vision, because we, again, don't know what those amendments will ultimately look like. And based on all of that information, staff found the application's requests consistent with the findings outlined in the Land Development Code for a petition to rezone and for planned developments, because with planned developments, because they are asking for deviations, there's other standards that we have to evaluate those deviations against. So based on all those factors, staff was able to provide a recommendation of approval. And we are here to answer any questions.
How do you plan to memorialize the restriction of uses? Those are pretty important.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
How do you plan to memorialize the use restrictions so that a generation down the road, future owners of these condominiums will be bound?
Well, condition 2A has the schedule of uses, and then they will have their restrictive covenants and deeds that are recorded. But also, we have a code requirement that master concept plans are supposed to be recorded with the property. So anyone that does title work good title company should go ahead and produce that document for them. But if this board does not think that that is enough, we're open to discuss.
And let me add to that, when going through development order stage, developers or applicants are required to submit, prior to being able to get a plat or anything else, restrictive covenants that show that they can be sued, and they can also enforce any actions to make sure that it's a mandatory association. It's mostly to protect stormwater roads, and it's quite extensive, the list. I can provide it to you if you wish under separate cover. But it does require certain elements to be checked to make sure that that is recorded and cannot be amended unless we are provided with copies prior to amendment, and we can object to that. We can incorporate the additional restrictive covenants during that review.
Thank you.
Okay, before we continue, how about just hold your questions. We're going to take a 10-minute break, okay? And then we'll continue. Some people have to,
Yeah, I understand.
okay.